Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show, we're talking about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Manifest. So a lot of interesting things kind of picking up with this episode. Some corrections about some stuff I talked about last episode, or at least things that happened last episode I'm kind of getting back to. Interestingly enough, for whatever reason, the person who was in a car accident with Michaela, for whatever reason, I don't know why, I just assumed the person was a kid. At no point they actually said it was a kid. I don't know why. It just made me assume it. I was like, of course it wasn't like a daughter or something. I don't know what made me say all of that or think that. Like I thought, I was like, for whatever idiot reason, I'm thinking maybe like a daughter, but at the same time I was like, no, it's more likely like the daughter of a friend or something like that. It's like, no, it's a friend in general. She was in a car accident. She was drunk. Like we already kind of heard what she had to say last episode about it because it comes up this episode when she's kind of, being like getting a psyche valve because of like her her everything she's kind of been through in the past couple of days because it's only been a couple of days. But there's also like the couple months prior to her during the whole prior to the whole flight 828 situation. So, but it was a friend of hers that died and she was drunk, but she was ruled not guilty in that whole situation, but she still felt guilty. So I wonder what brought that about. Like, I don't know if that was ever, that's never really been looked into, like, what that was. Was she drunk? I mean, the moment she was like, oh, I was investigating. So I don't know if it was just kind of and the fact is that the lady, the therapist or whatever, brought that up, kind of made you go, or psychologist, I think it's probably the more appropriate term, not therapist. The psychologist was kind of like, oh, you were drunk. So it's kind of like maybe that alcohol did have an influence in that. Maybe they were just partying and stuff like that. Nevertheless. The other thing I didn't realize, and maybe just because they were bunched together, I just, for whatever reason, I assumed it was everyone from the flight. It was only 20 people specifically that showed up before the plane exploded. So I thought that's kind of interesting. I was wondering, I was like, oh, are they going to suffer any ramifications for that? Oh, it turns out, because it's like, yeah, there were cameras that caught everybody. It's like, yeah, the plane exploded, and y'all just happened to be nearby and stuff like that. So, which is interesting in itself, because it's like, out of everyone on that flight, it seems only 20 people specifically were affected. So it makes you wonder why those 20 specifically. Maybe they were specifically chosen just because of their respective background, because it feels interesting because it's like, let's use an example of like Savani being the very smart lady she is connected to this whole like medical situation. So there's that. You even have Michaela being a cop. So you're like, okay, there's definitely something going on there. So I think it seems like it's going to be one of those things of like a grand design. It's like these specific people, because eventually it's either something with them personally or something that's connected to them that's going to lead down this road of connected pieces with this whole situation. What I'm chalking it up to. Because we see the kind of furthering of that in this episode, because Ben is helping out one of the dudes from the plane. He's playing music because he's hearing a certain tune, and Ben's been hearing it in his head too. It seems like this guy's son was 13 when he left. He's 18 now, but he's in jail because he was arrested for robbing this place. He says that he was knocked out and being kind of basically framed. He woke up and everything was gone, and that is that whole situation. So, and Ben wants to do whatever he can to help him, because Ben knows what it's like to be in that exact situation, because he's going through that with Olive. It seems like Olive's being like distant towards him, but at the same time, it's like, I was wondering, is it like, because it seemed like she was very receptive in the first episode, but now in retrospect, it's like, oh, because she knows like Grace is keeping a big secret from Ben that she's having an affair or she met someone else, and there's a whole thing going on there, and she doesn't like the lying and deceiving, and she probably felt like if she spent time with her dad, then she'd be like responsible for like continuing that lie, and she doesn't want to lie to him, especially after finally getting him back after all this time, especially because he's trying so hard to make an effort too. So Ben understood that, and that's why he strove so hard to help out this guy. In the long run, it ends up turning out that it was the business owner's son. I kind of had an inkling, just because it's like, yeah, you guys are the only ones there, so it kind of seemed like it might have been an inside job type of thing. But the moment Ben saw him, so it's like, oh, so you don't want to steal. He's like, oh, that kid, he was going nowhere anyway. Who cares? Ben punched him and knocked him out. I didn't see that coming. I was like, yo, because I was thinking, like, I didn't know how that was going to play out, but I'm like, yo, Ben, that was pretty nice. But I think it's also, like I said, because as a father himself, like, the thought of someone probably doing that, putting his daughter in a similar situation, probably pissed him off. It's like, this is a man's son's life. That's up, because he was getting beat up, like where he was being held, and then, like, when it was all said and done, he would have gone to a much worse place, and it would have been much worse for him. He could ultimately die, and it's like, you put him in a situation like that, like, you're a piece of crap human being. So, But that was kind of a pretty nice like tie off to that story. I just thought that was kind of pretty interesting, like them kind of investigating like that. So, like I said, it seems like everyone else is kind of a bit of a puzzle piece. Because it also seems like, too, and last episode kind of pointed this out, too, not everyone is getting the same thing. Like, the thing Ben and Michaela were doing last episode, like, the other people, the other 18 people who were connected to everything that showed up that night, their first times probably really experiencing anything was that pull, seeing the plane in their heads, and the need, the force, and the pull to go to the plane. So, and it doesn't manifest itself as the same thing because Savani never heard the music. So it does seem like there are some situations where it's overlapping. I guess when one person isn't really paying attention to the clues or the necessary push in one direction, someone else follows it. Because in this case, like the music they were hearing, I thought it was connected to like, oh, because he plays music and I thought that like all drawn to him. It's like, no, it's because the son in this case, the jewelry store owner's son, the ringtone to his phone was that melody. That was the kind of the tie-in. So, but the thing is, like, because Michaela continued to hear the voice because Ben didn't do anything. Because remember, he drove by there first, but then maybe he got it because Michaela didn't. But it could also because, like, amongst anyone on the plane, they are the only people that are connected, at least to our knowledge. Like everyone else, like her, Cal and Ben are the only relatives, you know? So maybe that makes their situation a little bit different. But even under this circumstances, like, Michaela never said anything about hearing it, so it was only something Ben. So, like I said, it seems like it is kind of like certain people are pushed in certain directions because, I guess, like I said, certain things in their lives will play into helping do whatever it, like, mission they're kind of being sent on. Because Ben's whole situation, the reason why he was there was because he was there with Olive, and his situation with Olive, you know, like I said, it's all connected because it's just like, oh, Olive there was a storage unit that Olive's taking him to that just happens to be in the same place as a storage unit that the Jor's store owner's son was keeping everything stashed in. You know, coincidences and stuff like that, which is like, Michaela's like, yeah, you telling me that this isn't some grander power or something like that. Ben, being the logical person that he is trying to find some greater, like, he's like, no, there's got to be some, you know, being logical, he's trying to find, like, some logical meaning behind it, but there's definitely something there. Because even Cal drew a picture of their family and he drew a shadow, which it's hard to say whether that shadow is just a shadow or whether it's like, because we saw it first manifest as a shadow, but later on in the episode, it seems like it's a real person because one of the ladies, one of the 20 who showed up ended up going on TV talking about a conspiracy theory that people are following her and stuff like that. And my only thought process behind it is that, and you see her kind of smirking when she's on the TV, when she sees herself on the TV. I think it's because she was trying to use this as a way to get famous, because it's like, oh, there's so much drawn and attention. Because she was so quick to try and get out of there so fast. I guess because she wanted to use this as ammunition, because it's like, oh my God, look, the government is hiding so much stuff from us. I bet you they knew a lot more. So I think she was so in such a hurry because she knew she had her interview coming up. She was trying not to miss it. So I'm pretty sure that's all connected. So it's just, the look on her face makes me think she was just trying to get famous. She was trying to take advantage of their situation. So, but that also proves that whatever this situation is, they are expendable. Yes, it sucks, but I guess that's it. Like, the other people are in reserve. Like, whatever role she might have needed to fill, it's like, it's probably just going to substitute one of the other passengers to kind of step up to fill in that role. So for whatever reason, maybe it needs those main 20 pieces. Each one of them is like a piece on a chessboard, and it just needs these main 20 right now. Maybe the others are being activated, but only those specific 20 needed to come to the plane. So, you know, I'm very curious to see how that ends up ultimately all playing out in the end. Because like I said, like, either it's an energy source that, like, whatever this entity is, it can possess a human, or, you know, because something made me, because there's a whole thing with Cal. I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. This lady's saying like, oh, he's risen and stuff. It's like, oh, do you know something is going on? Like, what's up with that? Are we going to see more of it? It's like, no, 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 no. And the way Grace, and I'm glad they had that immediate conversation to explain it, because I would have thought like, oh my God, is she one of those people that knows something is real? It's like, no, she's a religious person that thing, because what they experienced is a miracle. Because out of anyone, he's the only child that was up there, and he looks exactly the same. It's like, oh my God, he's been going for 5 years, and he looks exactly the same. So it's like a miracle. So religious people are like, oh my God, like he has risen. They're thinking kind of like a Jesus thing is going on there. So that was kind of interesting. Which is funny. Like I said, that's all happening while you have the Ben situation of like, no, 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 it's not something religious. No, 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 it's not like that. The government has no idea. The particular agent involved in this. I never went back to include this in last week's episode, but I was talking about all those Marvel connections. There's another Marvel connection right there. The main agent kind of running the investigation, that dude was in season 1 of Daredevil. He was one of the dirty cops. I was like, I remember that like after I'd already uploaded and everything. I meant to leave a comment on about it last week's episode, but I didn't remember, so I'm just adding it now. But it's just kind of interesting. It's like furthers like the connection, you know? So I thought that was kind of pretty neat. So I don't know, that's very interesting. Because also, like, if whatever that situation is, it used a pretty human method of killing. Because it's like, no, you heard it. It sounded like a gunshot. So it's like, which is pretty brutal. Way to go about silencing her. But this, like, Michaela's voiceover last week was already like, yeah, this thing doesn't want to be investigated. And it's like, that lady from the plane was drawing too much attention. So I'm curious to see if they end up finding out about that, and that in itself will probably it might end up making some of the people turn against each other, because it's like, did one of us do that or did something else? You know, because Ben is already in a position where he's telling Michaela, like, don't tell anybody anything, because the last thing they want to do is kind of like make people think they're crazy, and it's just like, you never know who's listening type of thing too. So it kind of makes everyone kind of be on edge. So on top of all of this, you have Michaela trying to deal with everything, because this is the first moment subsequently since returning that she's bumped into her best friend Lourdes. And there's that whole awkward situation, and Jared's trying to explain to her it's not Lourdes' fault, which Michaela understands. It's just a sad circumstance that she finds herself in, because it's like, hey, like, we were engaged, and now I come back and find out that not only you're married to my best friend, and it's such a complicated situation. She initially wanted to talk to the psychologist, because it's like, oh, you're just going to use this as ammunition not to give me my badge back. But eventually, she looked on Lourdes' social media and saw all the posts Lourdes had made. So it's like, at no point in time did Lourdes ever forget about her and like, oh, she's my friend. The moment Michaela ended up talking to her, and it was like, no, like, I was going to return everything I went through prior. It was too much. I was going to return the ring to Jared. The moment she was saying, I even said it myself out loud. I was like, is she saying that just to make her feel better? And they immediately answered, because it's like, yeah, she was going to say yes. She put on a ring. She texted him, but the message didn't get there in time. Once again, there is meaning to all of this. Lourdes being with Jared, I guess it works out in the end, because whatever it is Michaela is doing, there'll be too many questions asked if she's with Jared. Like I said, there are things set in motion in a certain way. You can tell it still bothers Jared, because there is a part of him, just like Michaela and Lourdes both love him, there is a part of him that loves both of them as well, because it's like, you could tell the look by like getting the ring back, and it's just, you know, for him it's just like, this is what could have been. And that's the thing for Lourdes. Like, this entire time she's like, no, you're the one he should have been married to, and I've always felt like a fraud. And just to make her feel better, to kind of create this peace, that so hopefully she could get her best friend back and maybe at least be able to move forward, because there is no going back. She's lost her mom, and she doesn't want to lose some of the last pieces to her life. So I guess she's trying to find some sense of normalcy in that regard. So she lies to ease Lourdes' pain, but that also just means that's more stuff she's holding on to, that's just going to make going forward that much harder, because it's like, yeah, you're going to probably bump into Lourdes a lot, because you're also going to be working with your ex-fiance, and that's just a complicated situation on its own. She also overheard the conversation with Grace. You know that, I mean, that Grace was having with whoever her lover was. It turns out it's someone Michaela nor Ben knows. At least that's what Grace said. I'm wondering if that's, like, I'm skipping around, but I'm getting the feeling that will probably circle back around. Maybe it won't. I mean, because they never went out of their way to explain who it was. We never heard a voice. We never, like, put a name or face to the person. It was just kind of like who she was with, so. because Olive kept being like, you need to tell Dad. It's not fair. He deserves to know. But Michaela overheard that conversation, but it's like, it hit her because she's literally going through the same thing, because it's like the person she loves most had already moved on, and now she's seeing the same thing happen to her brother, and it's just like, yeah, this isn't my business, but this is my brother we're talking about here. Like, tell him before he finds out on his own, which he kind of found out on his own because of because of Olive, which it turns out Olive had kept a lot of the stuff that her mom had given away or wanted to give away to Salvation Armies, because everyone was kind of telling her, like the therapists and counselors and stuff like that, because Olive had a feeling like, no, Cal's still alive. I know it. I believe it. No one really believed her, thought she was gonna, that was her, like, she was not willing to let go. And so she let go, and she wanted to get rid of all the stuff that reminded her of Ben and Cal, but secretly Olive kept it, and the place she ended up keeping it was in the storage unit of her mom's new lover, because it all ties into the whole scuba diving thing, because Ben ended up seeing the scuba diving gear, and he's like, whose storage unit is this? And kind of pieced it together that there was something going on here. So, but in the end, she doesn't regret what she did, because it was like, she did the right thing then by keeping that stuff, and she was right about it, even though you and everyone else were telling me I was wrong, and I was right to do this because Dad deserved to know the truth. And even Ben later on is like, everything she did for Cal, because she knew, because Cal, like, he was kind of being a little bratty about, he wanted this specific stuff, specific this and that, because so much had already changed around him. He wanted some form, like everyone in this situation, he wanted some form of normalcy, like, hey, not everything is completely changed. It's kind of what he was trying to hold on to. So it's like, you're the one that kind of has to let go now, Mom. And so there's a whole conversation between Ben and Grace, and he wants to kind of like, it's like we were given a second chance. So what happens from there? Like I said, whether or not we see the lover or not in the future, that's a whole other question. I doubt it, like I said, because we didn't get a name or a face. So, and there's also that thing about Olive, like, was that just like a twin thing, or was there something more? Because we definitely know that there is definitely something there with the whole Ben situation, because he's the only one that seems to know. Because he doesn't know, but it seems like subconsciously he knows, because he drew the shadow person. It's like, who is that? It's like, I don't know. Or maybe it's because he drew the person, but it's because he doesn't know who they are, but he knows that they're part of the situation or whatever. Because whoever they are, it seems like they are specifically tied to his family in particular, or maybe it's kind of like this shadowy essence or whatever that is tied to them. Like I said, so far it seems like it's doing some grand good, because it's like, oh, good has come out of these situations, but at the same time, we've seen it kind of go as far as it did by killing that lady. But to be fair, and it's something I didn't really elaborate on, because I was like, oh, maybe the people on the flight will kind of turn against each other. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. But now that I'm sitting here thinking about that long and hard, it's like, well, yeah, because it might be, the fact is that it was probably one of the people from the plane. It might be one of the other 19 who showed up at the plane, or it might be someone else, like I said, because the others who are on that flight might be having other missions, because this thing probably doesn't have a physical body. It has a certain will and power. It probably can't directly interfere in this world, and it probably can see and think. It can see and kind of put stuff in your mind, but it probably physically can't exist or work in our world. It can only tap into your mind and stuff like that. So someone else from that flight was probably tasked with the mission of killing her. So, which says a lot too, because like, whoever did that, like, are they a lot more connected to this situation? Will the voice not shut up about this situation until it's taken care of? Is this someone who's outside of the flight? This is someone from the flight? A lot of questions associated. That's kind of where my mind is right now on all of that. So I'm very interested to see where all this kind of goes forward. Is it just going to focus on Ben and Michaela? I mean, it seems like their family, is kind of at the center of all of this, with kind of like everything else spreading across. Like, was like Cal kind of like the epicenter of all of this, and everything else just kind of happens to branch out to these other people, because there are branches that are supposed to come back to the original. These are roots that are coming back to the original tree, and that's Cal. Like, is he kind of the most important in this situation? Hence why all of this is kind of set up to save Cal and stuff like that. Is he supposed to be like the embodiment for this thing? Is he supposed to be the vessel to enact its will? I have no idea. Like, I'm very excited to see what's in store for us in the next episode with all of this. But really, that's all I want to talk about in this episode. To the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.